Good afternoon. My name is Sebastian Zimek from Wesleyan University. I'm going to present work with my students on global privacy control. So what's the problem? Well, the most common business model on the internet is data for content. So instead of paying a one-time or subscription price, we are paying for content, for example, for social networks, for videos with our data. Now, privacy laws give us a right to opt out. So, for example, under the California Consumer Privacy Act, people can prevent websites from the sale or the sharing of their personal information. The same is true under the Colorado Privacy Act, the Connecticut Data Privacy Act, the New Jersey Data Privacy Act, and many more. But how can we actually exercise this right to opt out? We see many different screens here that all of us know. Some are related to cookies, which are partially also related to exercising the right to opt out. And so we all have seen complicated interfaces like the one on the right side, for example. So there we can evidently select something for US state laws, for Switzerland. And then if we look at the bottom, there's actually the TCF, the Transparency Consent Framework. So which normal users can actually understand this? It's impossible. And so the idea is we want to have a simple mechanism for opting out. And that is what global privacy control is intended to do. The idea is to have a little robot that pushes the opt-out button. So when we visit a website, then the browser tells the website to not sell or share our personal information. The same when we use an app. The operating system or some other platform software layer tells the app, as well as its integrated third parties, to not sell or share our personal information. We can opt out on all sites. On some sites, we can opt out on mobile platforms, on IoT platforms, essentially everywhere on each platform that uses the web as its underlying communication platform. That's where global privacy control will work. Now, what is global privacy control? Let's look a little bit more into the details. You can go to the globalprivacycontrol.org page. And so if we do that, then we have here information for users as well as for implementers. And the basic idea is that as an implementer, you want to check whether a user is sending you GPC headers or whether the browser has enabled GPC. And that can be done through a DOM property, for example. There are various implementation examples. So if we click here, we can see there is the server-side implementation. That's the sec GPC header, or the client-side DOM property that can be queried by a server and can detect whether a browser has enabled GPC or not. This specification is currently under consideration at the W3C, and here you can find the exact details of GPC. What's important to note here is that GPC can have different meanings in different jurisdictions. So for example, if you are a user in California, then GPC could mean to opt you out from the sharing of personal information as well as the selling of personal information. But if you're in some other jurisdiction, it could mean, for example, to object to the processing of data for ad purposes under the GDPR, for example. And so in that sense, GPC is a mechanism that can be filled with different meaning depending on what local laws are saying or how local regulators or legislators interpret this signal. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how we went about detecting whether a site is GPC compliant. But before I do that, I want to point you here to this website where you can find all our software that we used as well as the data. And what you will find is that we will have more data available here than we analyze in our paper. So if you go here to the data section of our site, then you will see here is the first 3 times in which we analyzed the data: December 2023, February 24, and April 24. But there's also June 24 and also data for 2025. This is all California data, but we will also make Colorado, Connecticut, and New Jersey data available for further research. So this is a resource that you can use to analyze sites and also analyze the data that we already provide here. The adoption of GPC, let's talk a little bit about that. One important mechanism to drive adoption here of GPC are consent management platforms. So if your website or if your app and you have to comply with GPC, for example, under the California Consumer Privacy Act, that's a requirement. If you are a business that falls under this law, then you can use your own custom implementation, or you can use one of a consent management platform. For example, OneTrust or Didomi. And all of these have support for global privacy control. Many sites respect GPC, some of them since the beginning, for example, the New York Times or the Washington Post, and others came later. There are browsers that have GPC included. Firefox has a GPC setting, Brave, DuckDuckGo, and if you're using a browser that does not have it yet, you can use a browser extension. We work with non-profit organizations. For example, Consumer Reports is very active here, as well as with governmental regulators. So in particular, those of California, Colorado, and Connecticut. Now, what's the methodology that we use to identify whether a site is actually compliant with GPC? First of all, we visit a site without GPC enabled. That's our base condition. So we don't exercise our opt-out right. Then we enable GPC, and then we try to detect on the site whether we see some reaction to this enabling of GPC. And that reaction can be seen in privacy flags, such as the IAB US privacy string, Google's restricted data processing RDP, or Meta's limited data use LDU. The idea is here that the site receives the GPC signal and then propagates this signal by enabling the opt-out right in these different privacy flags. Third parties can also recognize GPC directly. We send GPC signals to both first and third parties, but their normal way of recognizing GPC is to look at these privacy strings. And that's also what we leverage to find out whether our opt-out is propagated towards these third parties. So what did we find? Here you can see 3 different time periods, each with 2 bars. So for example, for December 2023, before we sent a GPC signal, there were 1,507 sites that did not opt us out. So we analyzed 11,000 plus sites, and about 1,600 had the US privacy string implemented, 1,687 to be precise. And before we send a GPC signal, 1,507 did not opt us out. 31 did opt us out no matter what, and 132 said that the opt-out right was not applicable to them. Then, after we had sent the GPC signal, 663 sites opted us out, and 871 still did not opt us out. So we see that a good number of sites is compliant and actually respects our opt-out right, but more than 50% did not. And so we analyzed this over time. So the next two bars that you see are from February 2024, and we see some improvement. After sending the GPC signal, 777 sites opted us out. So 663 to 777, small increase. And then basically in April 2024, the situation stayed the same with 770 sites opting us out. So we see a small trend towards more compliance. But we also see that we still have a long way to go. And what we will do is we will analyze the data over time, and then we can also tell whether, for example, regulatory enforcement actions are effective. We should see, for example, an increase in opt-outs here after such regulatory enforcement. Now, here's another privacy flag. It's the global privacy platform. During our analysis, the US privacy string was deprecated and the GPP was introduced. And what we can see here is in December 2023, only 44 sites opted us out according to the global privacy platform. And that increased then to 106 and 131 in April 2024. So we see an overall slow adoption of compliance technologies. And this one here is was introduced at the time when we performed our analysis, when the IAB said that the US privacy string, what we had seen earlier, is deprecated and people should switch to this one. And we see an overall small and slow level of adoption. Now, how can we increase the impact? There are 2 points. First, we can focus on big publishers. Many publishers have hundreds or even thousands of sites. And their GPC implementation and how they propagate people's opt-out rights towards third parties is often the same across all of these sites. And so in our work, we notified some of the big publishers, and that made already a dramatic difference. There's just a few big publishers who were non-compliant, and those non-compliance is not necessarily malicious, but simply also often a factor of incorrect implementation, then that will have a big impact on users. The same is true for individual high-profile sites. So there may not be a big publisher, but if one site has many users, that will also make a big difference. And so regulators can focus on big publishers as well as individual sites with many users to make a big impact. Now, if you want to analyze the data here, is available to you as well as our software. And we will go forward with crawls every 3 months. And we will also make states data available that we did not discuss in the paper. So the paper is about California with 3 data points from December 2023 until April 24. But we also have now data for later parts of 2024 as well as for 2025. And we will also make data available for additional states. So you can go here to this URL and get our software and get the data for you to analyze. Thank you for watching. Thank you also to our supporters, the National Science Foundation under the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace Program, as well as Wesleyan University, and the Aniel Fernando Endowment. If you want, contact me. You will find my contact information here on privacytechlab.org, and I'm happy to discuss our work here further with you, point you to data, and hopefully we can improve the opt-out situation on the internet.